Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley, as always. I hope you're doing awesomely well, and I sure am glad you are here listening to this show. She's back. Who am I referring to? Nervous system expert, Irene Lyon. If you've been a longtime listener of the Grace and Grit podcast, you are very familiar with the name Irene Lyon. Irene does massively important work in the world. She helps people to better understand how their nervous systems work. And more importantly, she helps people to develop skills that will allow them to more easily regulate their nervous system. Because life gives us a lot of opportunity to dysregulate our nervous systems. Now, I repeatedly invite Irene back to the show because while I teach a lot of skill sets to my own clients in regards to stress management, Irene teaches a lot of work that I consider to be very foundational in creating any kind of meaningful behavior change. And twice a year, Irene opens the door to her 12-week Smart Body, Smart Mind program, which I am a very proud affiliate of. I always remind people this is the only program I'm an affiliate of, which hopefully says a lot about the value in the program. Not only has this program influenced my own life, but I have seen it influence a lot of the women in my community's lives. So I have seen it affect my own clients in very profound ways. So if you are interested in finding out more about Irene's 12-week nervous system program, I would just encourage you to head on over to graceandgrit.com/smart body, smart mind. Now, at the time of this episode dropping, membership to this program or registration for this program is only open until February 22nd. So don't delay if it is something that you are seriously interested in. And I do want to remind you as well that every time we open the doors to this program, anyone who signs up through my link will also get 6 months of free membership inside of my Rumble and Rise community. And why? Because Rumble and Rise, the work that we do in there, really helps to support the regulation of a nervous system. So I think it's a beautiful companion to Irene's work. Now, the conversation you're going to hear today was actually recorded on an Instagram Live that I recently did with Irene, and I decided to repurpose it as a podcast so more people could listen to all the goodness in this interview. But I do want to just kind of preempt the show by saying this is a repurposed audio file from Instagram, so the sound quality might be a little bit less than perfect, but hopefully it's still really good. So in this episode specifically today, we are going to cover how a dysregulated nervous system makes midlife so much harder than it needs to be. We are going to talk about why the nervous system is so important to regulate and such a brilliant place to begin if you are on a quest to improve your health. We are going to talk about what the nervous system, of course, actually is and how it gets dysregulated in the first place. We are going to explore how to go about finding qualified nervous system professionals. And of course, we're going to share a little bit about what separates Smart Body, Smart Mind programs from other programs out there. So I hope you're ready. Welcome to the show, Irene Lyon. You and I first met almost a decade ago. Like you were one of the very early guests that I had on the Grace and Grit podcast. It's so crazy. And I mean, I knew nothing then. I just kind of knew nervous system health is kind of an up and coming thing, even though we've been living with nervous systems for, ever. The dawn of man. And now, having gone through your programs and I just feel so much more educated in this topic, still doing my own work all the time. But what's interesting, I wanted to bring this up to you when we first got on, because when you and I last spoke, you kind of made this
the cuff comment that I seem so much more regulated than when you first met me. And you're so not wrong. I felt it. I felt that comment in every fiber of my being. Because I know that when you and I first met, there was almost a frenetic energy to me. You know, it could come off as confidence or just excitement or passion. But in my heart of hearts, I really knew that so much of that energy was not coming from the best of places. Yeah. And so it's really cool to be in this phase of my life, having done this work and still, of course, practicing this work, to just feel so much calmer and so much more at peace and so much more even keel with my energy. So anyway, I want to thank you for that, because it's a huge testament to your work. And also, I think, a testament to just managing the stressors of my life, which I don't think I was taking responsibility for quite a while. But now I am.
And you know, yes, thank you, Courtney. And you're welcome. And what's interesting, I mean, I'm in the same boat too. I like cringe when I look at some of my older videos and I hear my voice, and it's faster, it's sharper, it's higher. You know, I'm younger, no gray hair, but you know, there's still not an immaturity. I was immature. There's a dysregulation. Right. And that, I think, is important to point out that, I mean, you were in fitness and health, so you knew how to stress relieve and all those things through your movement. And just like I did, because I was in fitness and health, I mean, our trajectories are very similar. But even when we have those good tools, it doesn't replace good regulation of the nervous system.
Well, and you and I have talked a lot over the years about how unregulated a lot of health professionals are, how dysregulated. And some of that energy that, again, from the outside can seem like such a good thing. It's coming from almost an urgent place, like a place of almost performing or hustling or earning. I'm not really sure exactly how to describe it, but it's not necessarily coming from the best place. So I wanted to start this conversation because the work that I do largely in the world at this point is helping midlife women to unpack some of the stress from their life. Because there's stress in our life that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over, right? Like, there's always going to be stress in life, and it's not always a bad thing. But there's a lot of stress in our life that we have a lot of control over, that if we don't take radical responsibility for it, we get ourselves into a whole lot of trouble. And I want to have this conversation with you today. Number one, so you can definitely share kind of the value and the delight of Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is coming up. But I would like you to maybe speak to the challenge that midlife women face, because you and I are both in that camp, and I know we work with a lot of those people. Where there's this simultaneous thing happening where the hormones that help us to manage cortisol are starting to leave the party. And we are also contending with more stress than we've ever had in our life. And I guess where I would like you to start is maybe talking about how the nervous system fits into that, and how it can either support us in that or really make it painfully hard.
That's a good one. Do we have 5 hours? No.
I'm joking. I know. No, we don't. We have like 30 minutes.
I'm joking. No. So, you know, that's actually a good question. I don't think about midlife that much, but I guess technically, I'm in it. And I want to say one thing, and then I'll get into the nervous system. This is more personal, but about 1.5 years ago, my cycle started to get wacky. And I was someone that was like perfect. Not, you know, I'm like, what's going on? And who knows what was going on? It could have been environmental factors. I have no idea. But all the emotional nervous system work in the world actually didn't help. So I want to say that, you know, I'm someone that will seek out more than what my profession is. And at the end of the day, I needed to see a really good naturopath. I had to get some labs done, and I needed to supplement with some bioidenticals. You know, I'm not going to try to be a circadian rhythm saint like some of my good friends are. And it's not my nature to just go one way. So I'm like, I'm going to do some other things. I'm going to get really into lymph and castor oil packs and proper supplements and movement in a different way. And that it's completely shifted. Like back to normal, more regular and more healthy than even in my 20s and 30s. So I want to say that because yes, our hormones shift, but I also think we can maintain them at a much higher level than what our mothers went through. Because we have all this information and access to more natural healing supplements.
Yeah.
And then if you put the nervous system piece on top of that, it's like, holy moly, it's a winning combo.
Yeah.
So, and I want to say that because I've met some women who, when they do work on their emotional nervous system traumas, their deep traumas, their cycles completely miraculously change, and that's all they need. So there's no cookie cutter. Every female is a little different. And I do think this is where genetics do play in a little bit with our cycles.
Sure.
It's that's the one thing, kind of like our hair color, where it's like that I think does rule a little bit more than, say, mental illness and addiction that we've often said is genetic, but now we're seeing is much more nurture based due to dysregulation of the nervous system. So I want to start with that.
Yeah. And I think it's a really fair point. And I think it's so important that we are all, number one, we're all multidimensional and we all have such a different history and different biochemical misalignments. And there is so much that goes into a healing process that differs from person to person.
Exactly.
And the thing that I see consistently with the midlife population is they're trying often to make really big change in their life. I always call it the renovation years. Like we're trying to renovate a house, which is no small thing. And we are not, a lot of times people are not prepared to do the work because that is a level of stress. It's good stress to do renovation work, but it requires a lot of resources to be on board in order to do that work. And if we don't have those resources on board for a whole host of reasons, we just add a lot of unnecessary stress to our life and things just get messier.
Yeah.
And so I have found, and this is why I'm constantly referring out your program, is when a woman comes to work with me and it's so clear to me how dysregulated she is because everything is stressful, and even the way she's talking and the inability to give herself permission to rest, all of these things are coming to light. And it always makes me turn to nervous system work because I want them to learn about the health of their nervous system and all the simple measures that they can start taking to actually help regulate themselves. So they actually do have more resources on board to do this bigger work at midlife. So do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the first thing that's important to realize is, and I was just talking about this hour with a peer of yours, it's so hard to convey, Courtney, how much as humans we have held in. So how much we have had to cope, manage, push down at the expense of our biological health. And I also like to say, because a lot of people hear the word trauma, because trauma gets connected with my work, and that's true, right? We're working on healing old traumas, old survival stress. A lot of people will get a little scared of that, where some people know they had trauma. Like, it's like, there was abuse, there was this, it was terrible. Parents were alcoholic, whatever it is, bad. But then there's a lot of us, and I fall into this boat, where everything kind of looked fine. Like there was food on the table and, people were nice to you and you got to go on ski trips and, there was never stress about money and all these sorts of things. And I had a good school, it's like I had a boyfriend, like we had fun, like all these things. Like how could there be trauma there? But it's like breaking down the structural norms that have been put in place since sort of the domestication of plants and animals, which is crazy to think about. But it's when we stopped being nomadic in our way of being and living, but it also made it so that we stopped connecting to the natural rhythms of the earth and like, rather than, oh, I kind of feel like going over there today. It's like, oh, I can't, because now my animals are in this spot and I can't just move them. You know, all the way down to, you know, aristocracy. And, you know, I've recently watched, did you ever watch The Gilded Ages? It's a new show. Oh, yeah. You would love it. It's like, it's 1800s in New York City with the high class.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not good for us. The way that the women were dressed and you couldn't express. And if you fell in love, it wasn't good. And all the impulses. So what I want to say about that is our animal nature needs to come out, but we also don't want to be savages. Yeah. Because a lot of people, like, if I let my anger out, I may never stop. Or if I start crying, I may never stop. And that's valid because people, I think, know how much they've been holding in. So the key to doing this work in a sane way, in my opinion, is to slowly enter into it. And the word we use is titrate in a titrated way so that we're not blowing the system open so quickly that we don't know how to clean up the pieces. We want to, I think it is important to realize how much repression we've lived through, not just us, but our parents and their parents and the sacrifices. And we know this through research with intergenerational trauma, like it gets passed on. But at the end of the day, we are the ones who are left with the residue of this history of trying to figure out humanity on this planet. Yeah. With civilized, I like civilization. I like running water that's hot coming out of my tap.
Yeah,
I like hot baths.
I think it's nice.
Like, I like that. I don't want to have to go build a fire to get hot water. So it's like, it's again this balance of, okay, these things are good. This other stuff, not so good. Right?
Yeah. Two things come to mind to me. Like, number one, I hear you saying, like, there is a level of trauma that comes with modern day living because it is so much constraint and, like you said, suppressing the way we truly want to express, even just the lack of mobility, right? People sitting all day and kind of living in these cubicled lives. I think all of that is a level of micro trauma. And I know that you and I have talked a lot about the macro and micro trauma over the years. But the other thing that comes to mind is I remember watching an interview with Gabor Mate last year, and he was talking about autoimmune challenges and how to him, it's really no surprise that I think it's like 75% of people diagnosed with autoimmune disorders are women. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, because you think about all the suppressing and quieting and sort of, you know, being the nice girl and trying to keep the peace that women do. Yeah. And that has a toll, which is on the nervous system.
That's 100% true. And I mean, I don't have my own biological babies. I know you do. And like the world that the feet, and this might be controversial, but I'm just going to say it. You know, the world of mom being at home with the kids, there's goodness in that. You know, and I'll never forget meeting that. You'd love the story. I was at a conference. It was a very bro type of conference. Like Tim Ferriss was there. So it was all dudes. Yeah. And, but there was a mother there, the mother of the two conference organizers. And she was, you know, exploring the second part of her life. You know, her babies now have husbands and kids and they're off. And I remember sitting at this round table with her in a conference room, and she was almost like, she was so stressed. So this goes back to what you were asking about stress. And like, you could see the stress because she was speeding herself up because she wasn't more accomplished. Yeah. She didn't have a career.
I hear this a lot.
And I looked at her and I said, I've met you. I get goosebumps thinking about this now. This was years ago. I'm like, I've met your two sons. They're amazing men, human. One of them had kids. The other was about to get married. I'm like, you did your job. Like, you don't understand how much goodness those two boys are going to put out into the world. And she just started crying. And I'm like, wow, nobody has ever acknowledged how important being a stay-at-home mom was, because we know it's not just that. It's cleaning and cooking and keeping the home life lovely and in regulation and in balance. Like, that is so important. And I think this stress that a lot of women feel, and this is just my own speculation, is this fear that we're not doing enough because we're not doing more than just. And then there's some people that don't have kids, and that's fine. Like, that's choice, right?
Sure.
But it's sort of, to go back to that original question of stress in women, if we don't realize how much survival stress is driving our actions and behaviors, we can do all the clean eating, all the exercise, all the mantras, all the journaling. But if you're doing the journaling and there's this part of you that's like pissed off, that's not doing any good. And maybe you have to work on stored anger, because as girls, we're typically told girls can cry, but they can't get mad. And our boys, our guys, poor guys, it's like they've been told you can't be sad and show vulnerability. You can only be angry. And, this is a stereotype, but it's something that's really harmed us, because we as humans, we have all of it. We have to be angry, sad, grieve when something bad happens, be joyful, have surprise, be feeling. And sometimes we need to, pull up ourselves by the bootstraps or whatever they say, and maybe push a little. Yeah. But then we have to balance that. And I find with so many women, they've just been pushing. And totally. Courtney, I have people in my life who have passed because of this, they've gotten sick because they've tried to do it all. And at some point you have to go, what's most important? Yeah. What's most important? And that's where, again, getting back into that biology, when we really sink into this body and listen at that cellular, emotional, nervous system level, it actually knows what we need. But we've been covering it up, literally, like you mentioned, the remodel. When you paint, you got to cover everything and mask and tape. And it's like there's so much tape and covering on us. Like, we have to start peeling this stuff off.
Yeah. I've shared this story before, but years ago, my husband and I were trying to buy our first home in Boston. And we were so desperate, we were willing to look at anything. And we went into this one home that from the outside actually looked quite lovely. But I'm not kidding you. When you walked in the front door, the floor was like sloped downwards, and you could feel the whole house imploding.
Okay.
And I look at my husband, who's a builder, and I'm like, we've got this. And he's like, no, we don't. Like, Courtney, you would have to literally demolish this entire house and rebuild it in order to make it livable again. Wow. And I'm telling you all this because I think that this is one of the issues I bump up against a lot in the work that I do, is women are so fiercely focused on diet and exercise. Yeah. Like, that's the house, but their foundation is imploding. It is. And the foundation is that nervous system dysregulation. They have so much stress and so few stress management techniques and understanding really kind of how to nurture the nervous system, that they can do all of that work and still feel wildly dysregulated and incredibly unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in fitness and nutrition, in my 20s. So I know that, and I saw it. And I knew something was missing. I'm like, something's missing. I knew in my 20s, working at the gym, I'm like, I am not going to be content working at this level, because nobody's following through. Or if they are, they're being psychotic about it, and they're coming in sick and injured. Yeah. And I'm like, this isn't good. And what I have seen in my students, and I have no doubt you've seen this in yours, is that when that regulation, when that listening comes back at that core level, and not, because there could be, some people will ask, my impulse is to do bad things. And I know. So what's a healthy impulse and what's a not a healthy impulse? And I kind of say, well, you're just that's trial and error. You're going to have to figure it out. Kind of like the cry of a baby. At the beginning, you're not sure what that cry is, but after enough attunement, you're like, oh, that cry is this and that cry is that. So it's the same with your body. You start to listen to this is a feeling of, I think I'm a bit run down. I don't think I should do that hardcore workout. I should just go for an easy walk.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't want to do it. It's I feel lazy. Like, that's real. And then you get into the gym and then the energy is there. It's like, I had a mental block, right? And it's that just being able to discern, I need to take it easy because I actually am a bit run down.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't have to I did nothing. I just need to like take a bath and go to sleep early. Right. And then there's the ones where it's like, no, I need to get my energy going. That ability to discern what the body needs, from my experience, comes when we have regulation on board. Just like animals in the wild, they're not going to go for a run if they're not wanting to run. They don't go for runs.
Right. Or they don't have any reserves in the tank, right? They're not going to waste energy.
Yeah, they graze, they chase if they're prey animal, and they sleep and they play. Yeah. Like you don't have a zebra thing, I'm going to go for an exercise run. Like, they don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? They're constantly in that movement cycle.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a funny parallel, but humans, we do need to implement structured exercise.
Yeah.
Because of our lack of activity. So that's
and our environments that we put ourselves in.
So yes, when people say, "Oh, I'm active, I go for a walk, a couple days a week," I'm like, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had, it's like, no, you got to lift and you got to exert. But those of us that have, if I go into the kind of group, because I'm sure you work with folks who have chronic illness from time to time, when we have been pushing and pushing and pushing and overriding our need to rest or our need to scream. Gabor Mate will talk about the women who are sick at age 40 are the ones who have suppressed their anger their whole lives. So, and I'm being general there, but it's a very common trait. So we need to also maybe spend some time before we get into that structured exercise routine, nurturing the part of ourselves that never got to express the pain, the anger, the frustration. And if we do have a chronic fatigue thing going on, or a joint problem because of inflammation due to the nervous system being in dysregulation, there might be a period where, it is just going to be soft, gentle yoga or soft, gentle walk. When you had in your 20s been a hardcore athlete, this was me. Like, I was athlete of athletes in my ski town. And then there was like these periods in my last few years where I'm like, it was hell for me, Courtney, to not be able to go and pump weight.
Yeah.
But my joints would flare. Like, if I had gone to a medical doctor, they probably would have diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, because I was getting these flares in my joints, but it wasn't an autoimmune condition. It was my old traumas, my old freeze was pushing up against my psyche of wanting to push, and like, no, you got to rest. And it shifted now. But I say this because there's no like cookie cutter explanation.
Yeah, of course.
And the final thing I'll say around that is to not, if someone is like, oh my goodness, I really have no energy. It's like, okay, that's okay. You might need to rest. This is one of the concepts of the 5 stages of neuroplastic healing, which I teach. Yeah. Neuro relaxation. There might be a year or two where you need to gear it down into.
Yeah. And people don't like hearing this, right?
No.
This level of healing, it takes time.
It does.
And it often requires a little bit of pulling back in order to eventually push forward.
100%.
And I think you know this, but for like literally a decade of my career, I was very rooted in the fat loss world.
Yeah.
And what kind of got me out of that was the number of women I was having come in who were stressed to the hilt. Mm-hmm. They weren't sleeping. Mm-hmm. Their marriages were broken. They were having, stress at work. They didn't eat well, like all the things. Yeah. And then what did they want to do in the gym? They wanted to push themselves really hard. And I'm like, that you do realize exercise is more stress.
Yeah.
And in a system that's already drowning in stress, this probably isn't a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of pushback on that, right? Because we're conditioned to believe that no, exercise and calorie cutting is always a good thing. And it's like, well, no, it's a good thing in a system maybe that can handle it and dependent on the person who's asking for it.
Yeah.
But it's not great for all people. Okay. One question I think is really important for you to answer is, people may be watching this now or later and not really understand what nervous system regulation even is. So, like, if nobody had ever heard that term, how would you explain it in the most basic of ways?
Oh, I feel like that was like a test.
It is. You're going to get a brain later. No.
Yeah, I know. Well, the basic way is we get up and we don't need to do anything specific to feel good. Our digestion works. Our immune system is robust. We're not needing to, dopamine hit ourselves with a cold plunge.
Or on social media.
Yeah, we're not looking for the next survival thing to glom onto, to like feel adrenaline. Like someone asked me this a little while ago, like, what would it look like if everybody was regulated? I'm like, it would look kind of boring because we would just be like back in the day, nomads, hunting, gathering, having sex, having babies, raising kids, playing. When you hear about what tribal culture does, and not tribal culture in war, but where there's peace, there's a lot of lounging, there's a lot of playing, there's a lot of games. And the hunt and the processing of food is a very short period of time. It's intense when it happens, but then it's a lot of chill out. It's a lot of that ventral vagal, which we talk about, right? It's social engagement. So regulation is where we're not having to do something to feel better. And we're in a culture, and I, like you said, fat loss world, I was in fitness and rehab and all that. And even the mind body world has kind of gotten co-opted into, okay, we're going to do this thing so that we can feel this and manage this. And there's a time and a place for that. I always say to folks, if you need to take a deep breath so that you don't hit your kid, then please take a deep breath. But what would be even better is that there's no need to feel like you have to hit your kid, because that kid is being attuned to, so they're not being difficult. You're just in your own regulation, which then gives regulation to them, right? And
let me ask you this: like, if we were all regulated, I mean, at all times, it makes me wonder, like, where would art and a lot of the things that we create come from? Because what would drive us to do these things? I mean, I don't know. This is a genuine question.
Great question. If I think back to I wish if I had another lifetime, Courtney, I would study history, and not like World War II history, but like what the Egyptians did and the Incas and like, because you go and you excavate stuff from those days and age. And if we go into even like intergalactic Atlantis, like there was advanced stuff going on. And my sense is that history that's starting to get uncovered of advanced civilizations, that's the potential. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a little out there, but like those pyramids weren't built with like bulldozers, yeah, and cranes. Yeah, like there was something going on that put those things there, and whether that was from human intervention or some other intervention, like there was powerful stuff going on. And then we don't know, but something happened. Like, so we think that there was a cataclysmic event, like this has been talked about more right now. And then we started over again. And our starting over was a little clunky, a little clumsy. Yeah. But I think that, I mean, as I become more regulated, because there's no end to regulation, our capacity. Of course. Yeah. Like, I mean, the amount of psychic ability I now have with my husband, Seth, is crazy. Yeah. Like he'll be about to say something and then I'll be like, oh, is it this? He's like, right? He's like, get out of my brain. But it's because we're so in tune and in sync. Yeah. And so I think like if we were all regulated, I mean, certainly there'd be no war, there'd be no abuse, There'd be no destruction of the planet. We would treat our animals and human kids as they should be.
Yeah.
And I think art would be created when it feels right.
Yeah.
And we would just be in a much more simpler situation. But I do think our technology still has place, but it would be used not to escape.
Yeah.
It would be used for advancement of innovating more things that are kind of cool, you know? And that's, but again,
For the betterment of humanity, right? Like for,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting one if we had a crystal ball to look into that. But there's a great show. This is a little bit of a sidetrack called Station 11. I don't know if you watched that show.
Seen it.
It was a book, really good, very artistic, and it was basically about the world coming to an end due to a pandemic, funnily enough. But what it showed was the push for one side of the people to be creative and artistic, and they did plays and all sorts of things. And then there was this other side that tried to bring order back, and that didn't work.
No.
So it's a great show for that, because it does show what might happen if we kind of went back to zero.
Yeah.
And we are creative, we're of course we're creative. Look at all this technology and art that's being created, but there is this dark veil that's kind of descended upon us due to industrialization, domestication. But how can we have those things and stay well?
Yeah.
We don't have to die of an illness. And yet that's become kind of the common thing, is that. So, back to regulation. Regulation is just being really well and knowing what our system needs and knowing what our immediate family need. And that's really what in the past we were designed for. We weren't designed to know what was going on the other side of the world.
Well, and trusting that, right? Like, I feel like that's a big piece of it. It's not just knowing it, but trusting it and honoring that truth. Because I find so often with my clients, it's like I always remind them they do know. And then where they get caught up is in the self-doubt and the second guessing, and that someone else knows better. Oh, yeah. And that the 10,000 video clips they saw on Instagram today are telling them something else, And so there's that lack of self-trust, which I think the further away we get from self-trust, the more dysregulated we become. Well, I know one of the things that you and I wanted to talk about on this specific Instagram Live today was just that nervous system regulation has almost become a buzz phrase.
Yes.
And it's now becoming a marketing strategy. I mean, dear Lord, it seems like everyone now is teaching some component of nervous system regulation, which is dangerous because not all people are qualified to be doing this work. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that a little bit, maybe kind of what separates your work from what else is being sold out there, and also just to maybe educate consumers. Like, if you are going to do this level of work, which we certainly hope you will do at some point in your life, the sooner the better, what do we look for, and how do we know that we are engaging with somebody who really has the skill set?
That's a great question. And the first thing I'll say, because I just learned this the other week, I don't know if you see Instagram ads, Courtney, but there's a whole bunch popping up of women doing somatic workouts.
Oh, yeah, I see them.
And I just found out, because I'm like, this isn't like, they're doing movement, okay, but that is not going to heal your trauma. And I found out through a friend of mine who is an old-fashioned runway model that she was like approached to be one of those people. And
one of it in the ad.
So they're models.
Oh,
and there's a script, and it's basically a business that's trying to make money, but they're selling you this. It's like a magazine cover.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I'm going to say is, if you see these ads with, and nothing wrong with a beautiful lady with a good figure, nothing wrong with that. But she's got, she's doing the movements with her hips, and this healed my trauma. No, that is that's a red flag right there. What I would say for myself is I started this work back in 2004, right? And so that's when I started learning mind, body, Feldenkrais. It's hard for me to to say this without like poo-pooing others, because I know there's others that do really good work.
Sure.
But the one thing that you want to look for is, does somebody have credentials? So that's important. But it's also tricky because just because you have credentials doesn't mean that you actually know what you're doing these days. And that's the other tricky thing. So you kind of have to lay out all the cards on the table and see some credentials. But also, do they teach? And what I've started to find is that a lot of the fancy influencers that have the nervous system words and lingo, I can't find something where they're actually teaching, like more than a quick video of these are some techniques to regulate your nervous system. And that literally dawned on me this week, Courtney, because I was like, I want to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I want to hear them talk about polyvagal. I want to hear them talk about fight flight. I want to hear them talk about healing chronic illness and the lack of flow at the bladder level and the digestive level at the cardiovascular level. And there's nothing. So that's one other thing, is to look for that level of education. The other thing is, does the person look regulated?
Yeah.
and sometimes that's hard to know, because if you're not in your own regulation, you actually might be attracted to someone who's in a deep freeze.
Well, and this goes back to where we started this conversation. Like you telling me the last time we spoke that I appear more regulated than I did when you first met me, which is 100% true.
Yeah.
But I think as you become more regulated yourself, you really do start to see it in other people.
You do.
And it gives you so much empathy. I mean, when I see someone freaking out at the airport last week, because I was stuck in Salt Lake for 3 days, and people were just beside themselves. And it does give me empathy that, wow, their nervous system is really jacked.
Yeah.
Like they just do not have the skill sets to be able to parent themselves in this moment. But I just wanted to speak to that I definitely see dysregulation everywhere.
And so this is what I often do, because I get a lot of people asking me, what do you think about this person and this person? And that's kind of like the thing I hate the most, because then I go to these accounts and then I kind of go, and I'm not perfect, by the way. Like I am not this perfect specimen, but I will say my regulation is pretty strong, and one could say shown it through all the work I've done with my students. So I'll put that there.
Yeah.
But what you do is you turn the sound off and you watch people.
Interesting.
And you see their eyes and how much they might blink. I can't really mimic it, or their eyes will roll, or they look like they're a deer. And I can't, it's not something you can mimic because it's deep in the physiology, right? Or so there's either that deep freeze, that deep fear, or there's an arousal that's just so high. It's so high. And it's like, and you just,
that's how I was many years of my life.
Yeah. And that's fine. And what's cool is you can recognize that. Right. And so what I have found is, if you see certain spots where you're following people, and since we're on Instagram, we'll use that as an example, and there's very little variation. There's very little, we talk about heart rate variability, right? Good heart rate variability is big, and that means good regulation. We want to be able to move back and forth through activation and these deactivations through our responses. But what you'll see is a very thin line of variability, and it's either high or very low. And that's kind of a telltale sign. It's not the only sign, but it's one of the signs. So there's something about that. And then I really can't stress it enough. Like, are they educated?
Yeah.
At these levels?
Well, I think too, what helps to build trust so much with your work is that you have so many people testifying to the work, right? That they have been through the process. They have been doing the work, not just for a year or a few months, they've been doing it for years. And so I think also, just kind of referencing the communities of people that have come up through that practitioner, I think it's really important. And to even if they're not readily available, which I do think they should be, but if those testimonies aren't available, just asking for them. Like, can I speak to a student? Can I talk to somebody who's been through this work? I think that's really important.
Well, No,
Okay,
what I'm
sorry.
say with that, because sometimes people will be like, why are they having to do this work for years? If it's working, why do they have to?
Yeah, right.
And
Right.
I think that I want to answer that because that'll always come up as a question is like, again, back to what I said a few seconds ago, we don't realize how much stuff we have stored as humans in this current time frame on planet Earth. And I mean, I have a senior student who just yesterday was sending me a note. He's like, is this ever going to end? Like, is this ever, like, am I ever,
Yeah.
like but at the end of the day, it's like, they still are like sensing that there is capacity. The capacity hasn't collapsed, but holy cow, there's another boulder that I'm bringing out of my swimming pool, which is one of my analogies.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? And I think because we haven't charted this territory until now, we really don't know what is possible for healing, but also how much we've stored. So when people hear, oh, I've done SBSM, Smart Body, Smart Mind 6 times, I mean, we're going into the 15th round. Yes, sprint, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why are people still coming back? And it's like, because some people need to keep doing this work constantly. And I still am. Like, someone asked the other day, do you do your own lessons, Irene? I'm like, no, that'd be weird to like listen to myself. But, you know, I have an osteopath. I see body workers. I have other mentors and coaches that keep me in check. Like, I'm talking to people constantly. I'm getting feedback. Like, is my ego getting too big? Like, what is it? And so we're always, that's the other sign, Courtney, that I forgot to mention. Someone who's really in this work is doing their work.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. And just like acknowledging that life is dynamic. Like we are always like our stress levels don't stay the same. I mean, we're always dealing with
Up and down.
different things and new things and different dosages of stress. And so I think to think that this work would ever be done to me is a little weird because as long as you're living, breathing human, you're going to be contending with uncertainties and unknowns. And so these skill sets can just go a really long way in helping you to stay regulated throughout all of it.
They even gain regulation. And you know, what people have said, if it wasn't for the work they did through, say, Smart Body, Smart Mind, or my other courses, they would have been a mess the last 4 years, for example.
Yeah.
And rather than, you know, that example of the people in the airport is perfect because it's like, they're maybe not getting to where they need to go. That sucks. Yeah. That really does suck. And they're reacting as though the world is ending, and it actually isn't. Yeah. But that reaction is based in dysregulation, not being able to see perspective.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just saw a comment come through here that I thought was really interesting, that I don't want to be so focused on healing that I forget to live.
100%.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is I feel like a lot of the women that I work with, they aren't living, they're surviving. Like they are just barely keeping their head above water because they're in survival mode 24/7. So as they start tapping into work like this, they actually start living more because they start setting boundaries. They start saying no. They start going after the things they actually care about. They start taking better care of themselves, not because to lose 5 pounds, but because they actually know it helps them to show up more in a more powerful way in the world. So I think this level of work absolutely helps you to live on a much more powerful plane of life. Before we go, there's kind of 2 opportunities here. Smart Body, Smart Mind opens when? Remind me of the opening.
The 13th. So a week from now.
Okay.
Tuesday.
So it opens in a week. It's your 12-week course, which is really a kind of a you're teaching, obviously, there's modules, but it's really giving you self-leadership skills in the realm of nervous system regulation. And I definitely encourage, if anyone is interested on really doing a deep dive into nervous system healing, it's an incredible course. I can't say enough good things about it. But because that doesn't open for registration for another week, you also have your Healing Trauma series, which is free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So that was created years ago. So I'm going to put a disclaimer.
Okay.
I am younger. I am a little, still a little freeze there. So you'll see Irene in a different way than now.
Yeah.
So don't think that that's how the teaching in SPSM comes out, but it's still, to be fair, the content, the theory is still 100%, nothing has changed. So that 3 videos, I would say the first video to me is the best one because it goes into the swimming pool and beach ball analogy.
Yeah.
It also goes into my person A, person B analogy, which explains why some people can have a trauma and walk away and really be fine, and other people have one and their whole life goes into shambles.
Yeah.
That is really important to understand, because for some of us, we might be like, I think I'm okay. But then, and I've recently had this happen in my life for some people that I know have had some accidents, and it has unveiled a lifetime of stored up stuff, right? So if you can preload that knowledge and start to work on building capacity before that event occurs, I mean, light years ahead of knowing, of healing. So that video is super important. The other cool thing about that training is there's a 20-minute neurosensory exercise that is me guiding you through audio, the basics, orienting, following impulse, feeling the ground, following breath, not changing breath. So that just gives a little intro. It's by no means the full kit and caboodle, because in FBSM, we go pretty darn deep. I mean, we're working with the organs, the viscera, the layers of the body, the movement. We're working with the different tones of the vagus nerve. Like it is a comprehensive program because it's not just one methodology, it's 3. It's the work that I studied through the Feldenkrais method, somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work, and then the work of Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell working with early trauma at the organ level, and not organ level. And that trifecta, from my experience, is what makes SPSM unique. And I just think it has that, there's an essence when those 3 things are together. The other thing to mention is in SBSM, there's support. So you don't just get the course and have, good luck. There's 9 professionals who are trained, most of them at my level and beyond, who are in the moderation threads. So it's typing based on a website. And they're in there for 16 weeks. So actually more, we go over the course date when we end, and they're there to answer questions. So it's like you also get these amazing coaches for the tuition. So it's lifetime. And you can come back and ask questions whenever we run again.
Well, on that note, it's really funny. In my own community, we do a monthly power move, which is something that you're going to focus on this month that is going to improve your well-being, right? Cool. And it can be anything. But it was really interesting this month. I think we had 3 people inside the community all say that they were going back to SBSM principles and practices.
Oh, that's so nice.
For this month, because they were just feeling off kilter and they knew how much those things help to stabilize them. So I just thought you'd appreciate that note. That there's that.
Yay.
Yeah. So both of those, for anyone watching this now or later, both links will be in my bio. I think the Healing Trauma series is always already in there, but I'll also have the link for the wait list for SBSM. And then I've hosted Irene, I don't know, a dozen times on the Grace and Grit podcast. So if you want to hear more of our conversations, you can always go to the graceandgrit.com website and just look at just put in the search engine Irene's name and you'll find all of that. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. I always love talking to you.
It's so good to see you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And keep up the regulation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, once you go there, you can't go back. I mean, it's really, really, I have such a low tolerance for being in that space anymore, which is such a gift, because I lived there, I thought permanently. And now to be able to kind of see and feel how uncomfortable that is, I don't want to be there.
No, it's not good.
No.
When you come out of it, you feel how grating and destructive that way of being is, and it can take some time to get there. That I'm so honest about that. It's like, this isn't a quick fix. It is a lifestyle, but once you cross into that lifestyle and you really solidify in it, you're right. You can't see things in any other way.
But it makes me crazy because we normalize and we almost glorify regulation. And I think that's what happened to me is I was being praised for it. I was, always, succeeding at things and pushing through and looking like I was, the jack of all trades at so many things. And it was crushing me. And I think that for me to start doing that, because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, I started looking for that solution, which is how I landed on your work.
Yeah.
And look, now I see so many people that I can sort of assume that they're in that same space where like they're doing all these things and it all just looks so glowing from the outside. But I'm like, are you okay? Because we're not always okay.
No.
But we can make it look, we're really good actors and we can make it look like an awesome thing.
That's a really good point. And I think it's impossible to get into someone's house and see how they live when they're not on camera.
Yeah.
And that's impossible to figure out. But there is something about being a whole person. And I actually just talked to one of your peers. We'll be releasing her interview in the next 2 weeks. Jerica is her name. You'd really love it. And she's young. I'm just loving these young kiddos that are coming through and haven't had babies yet, right? And she's like, I was two people.
Oh, yeah.
This is how I was in this way, and this is how I was in this way. And I am now one person. And that's the part that is so important because many have gone to their grave not realizing that they can be one person. But the healing we have to do is pretty monumental because of the crap we've been fed for so long. But when we work at this stuff and keep working at it, as you have learned, we become that person. And like the way I talk here is no different than if I'm talking in a workshop, no different than when I'm talking to my husband. A little different when I talk to my parents, but that's something that's different, right? But this is how I am. Yeah. And that's what we want, because when you're pretending to be something else, it is energy sucking.
Oh, living one life is hard. Living two lives is twice as hard.
It sure is. And so that's the other benefit of really getting into this work in a deep way. You're going to save a lot of energy. Yep. And that energy can go through to processes that just need the energy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love it. Love you. So appreciate you. And thank you for being here. And we will be connecting soon. I have no doubt.
Thanks, Courtney.
All right. Bye. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Grace and Grit podcast and you are really eager to learn more about the nervous system, again, the doors to Smart Body, Smart Mind, the 12-week program that Irene talked about in this interview, their doors are now open. So again, you can find out all the details by heading over to graceandgrit.com/Smart Body, Smart Mind. And just a reminder that anyone who registers in this round of Smart Body, Smart Mind will also get 6 months of free membership inside of Rumble and Rise. But you have to use that link that I just mentioned, which again is graceandgrit.com/Smart Body, Smart Mind. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.